This is Frank Consello with the Crested Butte Home podcast, and this week my guest is from everywhere and from nowhere because he can count 30 places as home prior to Crested Butte. And after a highly suggested, I'm putting that in air quotes, stint in the military, he ended up in school for a long time, seeking advanced degrees and studying mice and brains. And in the end, he decided to stop mapping mouse brains and start mapping trails. A lot of the times bike trails, but hiking trails as well. And that led to Crested Butte and Gunnison's very own trail app called Crested Butte Trails and the accompanying game called Trailquest. Trailquest is a contest to ride all 750 miles of single track in the Gunnison and Crested Butte area, or hike them. And you can also add in wilderness trail miles, which are even on top of those 750 miles. And his company is now developing that contest to other locations, as well as developing virtual race technology, which in these times of coronavirus, all the races have been canceled for the most part, but you can use this app and get a race course, and it'll tell you where to turn and when to turn, and then you can compare your times to others. So really cool stuff. Anyway, please welcome Derrick Nehrenberg to the Crested Butte Home podcast. Today on the Crested Butte Home podcast, my guest is Derrick Nehrenberg. So tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're from to start off with.
Well, I'm a Southern boy. Crested Butte is the 25th place I've lived. I was born in North Carolina. That's where I lived the longest. That's where I went to school, and that's where I met my wife. So my parents live there now too. So I just say I'm from North Carolina. How about that?
25 places. That sounds like a challenge for me to make you name them all. But just a few highlights, maybe, or all in America? Like any interesting ones? What do you got?
All in America. My dad was a preacher. We moved around a lot when I was a kid, and then after I left home, I moved around a lot. So I lived in every state in the South except for Mississippi and Tennessee, and then I've lived in here in Colorado and Hawaii and Texas, and I could go on with a few more places, but I think you get it.
So what was it like growing up in all those different places, and what were you into as a kid? What activities were you into?
It was pretty lonely, to tell you the truth. Never enough time to make a friend or too many friends. So let's see, what was I into when I was a kid? After I got my first bike, I pretty much rode that thing and left home as much as I could on it.
Okay, so biking was a thing for you pretty early.
Yeah.
So what did you do? So you said high school. I think you said North Carolina was the end of the road there, and then what'd you do next? Where'd you go to school, or what happened next?
Yeah. Okay. So let's see here. I first went to a Christian college called Evangel, which is a Assemblies of God college in Springfield, Missouri, and I got kicked out twice. And then I went in the military, and I got some college money, and then I went to East Carolina University, where I got a degree in biology. Actually, I would love to East Carolina. It was a great teaching college. Also, it was the number one party school in the nation, voted by Playboy 3 years in a row. I was there for that. That was pretty fun. And then I went to graduate school. My degree was co-sponsored by Carolina and Duke. I got my degree graduate degree from Carolina.
Okay, well let's back up a little bit. So you got kicked out of this first college. There's got to be a good story. I got to ask. So what?
Oh, gee whiz. Well, there is kind of a story behind that. Let's see here. Man, we're getting pretty deep here. So in the summers, I wanted to make money without having to go back home. And so I sold books door to door, and I did really well. So I got recruited to be like one of the managers or something like that. And so I traveled with a group of other people to different conferences to meet up, to prepare to create sales teams. And on the way there and back from these conferences, we would race each other in our cars. And so I was stacking tickets on different driver's licenses and not caring because I could spread them. And then I got caught in Georgia I started getting arrested all the time, and ended up seeing a judge who told me that I could keep getting arrested and do time, or I could get out of the lower 48 by joining the military. So I took him up on that. I did. So I joined the military and did 3 years. Yeah, and that's how I ended up getting kicked out of Evangel because I was getting arrested.
That was a good story, and that answers the next question, which I was going to say is why you ended up in the military next. So that was probably a better choice, I'm sure.
Ended up being like the best and most defining experience of my life, other than like meeting my wife.
I was just going to say, what was that like?
Well, I was in the 25th Infantry Division, which is a jungle warfare unit in Hawaii, and I was a light fighter, and that was good. I liked it. I really enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoyed the training, and I liked the discipline because you didn't have to think too much. And it was also it was a good experience to be just a number. You're just a soldier, just like everybody else. But the training was really, really fun.
How so? What aspects of it?
Well, we had a lot of we did small unit operations. So anywhere we did assaults with just 4-man teams or 8-man teams or a platoon, sometimes the size of a company, but mostly it was the pretty small unit operations. And you got a lot of action. There was a lot of action.
And were any of these, were you deployed in places that...
No, I wasn't deployed. I was in during 91 to 94. We got on the planes a couple of times to go to Bosnia and then some other place, but we never flew out. My unit did get deployed right after 30 days, like after I left my unit. They got deployed, but I didn't see any action.
So after the military, you go back to college, East Carolina. You mentioned that, and then the military pays for that too, right?
50 G's.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That was definitely a good deal for you to pick that and then get school taken care of as well.
Yeah, the VA officer told me I was one of the few people that she'd ever worked with that actually spent all their money.
Well, that's good. That's good. I don't know why you wouldn't. So what is it then that you studied?
Undergrad, I was a biology major. I thought I was going to go to medical school. That was the plan. I worked really hard to make that an option. And then I decided not to, and then I didn't know what to do. I spent almost a year reading, trying to figure out what it was that I really liked. And I fell into behavioral neuroscience. It's something that started to really attract me a lot. And so I moved to UNC in hopes of attending school there because there were some professors that I wanted to work with.
Okay. And what is behavioral neuroscience in layman's terms?
It's basically just understand how the brain produces behaviors, how and why.
So like from a physiological perspective rather than a psychological perspective?
No, definitely psychological.
Okay.
I was in that was my program. I was in a developmental psychology program. So I was very interested in the development of behaviors. And I worked with a mouse model of aggression. I selectively bred mice for high and low aggression and then changed their environments and their adulthoods from isolated housing to social housing. And then did a lot of different, they're called assays, behavioral assays, pharmacological assays, neurobiological assays, trying to use the animal model as a system to understand what was different first in like an adulthood, and then a long-term goal was to track it across development, sort of taking like a systems biology approach. And I really enjoyed that work a lot, and I continued that work. I was really fortunate and unfortunate at the same time. But I got to keep working with those mice through both of my postdocs. So I did a really deep analysis of those phenotypes at a behavioral, pharmacological, neurobiological, and even genetic level.
And you said you felt lucky and unlucky at the same time. Well, expand on that a little bit if you can.
Well, the lab that I was working in at the time wasn't really run by a great primary investigator, and he lost his funding. And so if I wanted to continue to do my work, I had to figure out how to take the mice with me. And that's a big project for somebody who's just graduating with a PhD. But I was lucky because there were usually people move to another institution, and that's a smart thing to do. But there were people there at UNC who were interested enough in the work that they stepped in and they helped me to keep the mouse strains alive and support them and to fund the work.
Okay. So with all these studies, what was your end goal? Was it to be a professor, or what was your career path at that point in your head?
Well, I don't know that sometimes that's an Achilles heel of mine. I get really attracted to the problem and I don't really care about anything else. And so I wasn't really thinking about anything else than understanding how I could develop a model to understand take a systems biology approach to understanding differences in behavior. And I actually made a lot of progress with that. And I had a lot of papers. So what was your question again?
It was what was your career path in general?
My path was I did plan to become a primary investigator at a tier 1 university. That was my path.
Okay. But as far as I know, that didn't happen. So what happened instead?
Well, a few things, actually, a couple of things. So what I was doing, my final position, I was a genetics postdoc, and I mapped the architectural differences, the architecture of aggression in those mouse lines, and I got the same result that everybody else did. Basically, I was a part of this institution called the International Institute of Complex Traits, and I was using that mouse model to understand a complex trait. And there were a lot of other emerging models at the same time. And it's kind of an oxymoron if you understand how the science works to expect that the genetics of a complex trait are going to work out for you because you need a dominant gene, and they're just really rare in complex traits. But we thought we had one in our mouse lines because the aggression trait selected within 4 generations. So we thought that there was a big locus of control. And so there was a lot of effort to figure out how to do the mapping study, and then it took a long. We had to breed several generations of the mice to do it. So all at the same time, there were studies being published about the impossibility of doing complex trait analysis, and I'm like, great. And so I was holding on to faith that my model would work. And when we got our results, which are published, we had some pretty strong effects, but nothing that we could really hang our hat on as a dominant locus of control that we would you would spend a lot of money diving into the biology of it. So it sort of meant, and when I came out here on a trip to Colorado and was doing a tour, basically came out here to Boulder because we were thinking about moving. It might be an attractive place to move. And then we did a tour of the state, but it was in that trip that we decided I decided I was going to quit because I read a paper on that trip where it talked about how this is the biggest study ever conducted of plants, where they were looking at the combined additive and dominant genetic effects and traits in flowering plants. And it showed that all of them were additive. And I was like, well, if that's the case, I'm screwed completely. So it was on that trip where my wife and I had a talk, and we decided that we liked Colorado. And if it wasn't going to work out, the dreams weren't going to work out, I would just become a mountain biker.
In the Crested Butte Real Estate Minute, question that has been on everyone's mind here in summer of 2020 is what the local real estate market is going to look like with the coronavirus. And if it keeps up on this pace, it will end up being quite a busy summer, actually. We have seen more or less a doubling in the number of pending contracts in the first 2 weeks of June, and we've also seen an increase in inventory, which is great because we have had limited inventory for quite some time. So if you had been looking for a place a couple months ago or so, take another look. There may be some new listings that you weren't aware of. You can do that by visiting my website, which is crestedbutterealestateagent.com. Or you can also just give me a call. My name's Frank, and my phone number is 970-596-7990. Sometimes it's that easy. So On that whole trip, then you were just in Boulder, or did you?
No, we went to, it's interesting because our neighbor across the street, Chuck, who has passed away, was a dear, dear man. We went out and visited him and his partner in Ouray and stayed with them. And then the plan was actually to come to Crested Butte on that trip. But I went on a mountain bike ride and was showing off in a really tight switchback corner. I ended up flipping over the cliff and separated my shoulder and couldn't finish the trip. And so instead of going to Crested Butte, we went to Fruita instead. And turns out that's where we moved when we moved to Colorado. It's Fruita.
So you moved to Fruita, and when you say you're going to be a mountain biker, that means you were just hanging out and riding your bike, or were you?
No, I was working really hard. I was trying to. I'm a little bit of a workaholic. I really enjoy work, so I was actually really working hard. But I was working hard at trying to create. At the time, the idea was to create a GPS guided vacation service. That was the idea at the time. And so I was working hard at trying to figure out how to make maps that would work for that. And made them, and actually did pretty well over there.
So how explain it a little bit better. So someone books a vacation, and then you hand them a GPS.
I would hand them an SD chip that would have custom Garmin map. They just slide it into a Garmin unit and would have all their maps and their custom trips on it.
And this is what year then? This is like or too early for
2000. Yeah, too early for phones. That was 2010.
Got it. So how long did you do that, and how long were you in Fruita then?
We were in Fruita for 18 months, and my wife was like, "You've got to get me out of here. It's just so brown there." We both grew up in intense green, and so I'm not sure how green Salida is, but it's greener. So we moved there for 2 years, and then even the first summer the first year that we lived in Fruita, we saw how hot the summer was going to be. And we ended up spending that first summer in Crested Butte. And when we were in Salida, we would come over to Crested Butte a lot.
Okay.
And the Crested Butte sort of became a goal.
So were you doing the same thing in Salida with these?
It took on a little bit different. It's morphed into different things at different times. So then when we in Salida, it morphed into maps that you could follow on your phone. This is early mobile phone technology, early app store stuff.
And why did you go into these custom trail maps and things like that? What?
Well, at the time, this was way before Trailforks or any of that stuff, and there was nothing mapped like digitally. You could put on a phone and go follow. There were a few good apps, but nobody had the trail data at the time. And of course now it's everywhere. Still, we still have quite a long ways to go with improving trail data in an open way for the masses. But at the time, there was nothing. The tool that I picked up was OpenStreetMap, and I put all the trails in Fruita, the Arkansas Valley, Crested Butte, and Durango in the map by going and doing this stuff.
So you were making a GPS track and uploading.
Gotta go ride the trails.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a good excuse to go ride the trails. Why why go in that direction versus paper maps, or why not use paper maps?
Well, paper maps aren't the future.
Okay. Fair enough. Good answer. So what has that morphed into today then?
Well, we were very fortunate when we moved over here because we actually made some overtures to officials over there in the Arkansas Valley about helping their community map all the trails and to create an app that would make it free to everybody. And so we were very fortunate over here to find a partner in the Tourism Association. And it actually just started out as a really small project to map everything and just make it available. And so I keep forgetting your questions. I'm sorry. What was the question again?
Just keep explaining the story of how you made it from Salida to Crested Butte and what business turned into.
Oh, that's right. What is it now? So when we start after mapping everything, then John Norton, who is the executive director of the Tourism Association, asked us if we would consider making this game called Trailquest, which would be a challenge to complete all the single track trails in this area. And I blurted out immediately because I tend to not catch myself in time. That's the craziest idea I've ever heard. It won't work. I was like, we'll do it. because I kind of like crazy ideas, and we did it, and we figured out how to. So we mapped everything, which kind of was a challenge in of itself. And then especially at the time, since not a lot of the data was publicly available, and then writing the algorithm was actually super tricky. So somebody goes out and does a ride, joins, saves the GPS track, submits it to the app, and then the app figures out how many of those miles are trail miles and have been done for the first time and only the first time. So people get assigned unique miles to tally up to the 750-mile challenge. And it was a tough algorithm to write. It was a tough database to support, and we actually it took about a year to get everything working about right. But we were so surprised how popular that contest ended up being, and still is to some degree, that it changed the direction of what we're doing. So where we are now is we rebranded our company as Trailquest, and we provide a software platform for organizations to add challenges inside a Trailquest app. So like a Trailquest, or somebody could create a route and turn it into a race, like the Growler. And getting just to this point has been a ton of hard work, because it sort of meant inventing a little bit of new technology, some new software. And another thing that we've done as well is we've devoted probably about, I'd say about 40% of our effort on this past year developing audible turn-by-turn navigation. Is something that people have been requesting for a long time, and is super challenging for a number of reasons. But it turns out that this, which I don't know if you want me to get into right now, but this environment, this backcountry environment, where you have really poor cell reception in certain areas and it's good in others, and phones are going in and out, that's really hard for iPhone to do well. First, for like GPS tracking. And then to add turn-by-turn navigation on top of it is super, super challenging. But it's turned out to be a total blessing, because we can work in this environment every day and figure out how to make off-road turn-by-turn navigation work in a backcountry environment where a phone is going in and out of cell connection. And the reason it's hard for iPhones is because they prefer cell towers. So it's switching between the cell tower and the chip, and Apple's not very concerned about people not using their phones in the cities. It's given us an opportunity to get everything working.
Gotcha. So as you're going through this, I kind of am thinking in the back of my head, like, well, you were studying mice, and now you're talking about all this very techie stuff. Now, are you the coder, or how?
I'm not the coder, and to be just so you understand, there's nothing more techie than basic research.
Sure.
Mapping studies, the neurobiological assays, where you're like mapping the serotonergic system of a mouse brain and the GABAergic system. That is tough stuff. And whether you're mapping the brain or mapping the genome, it's all the same. In theory, there's a lot of overlap, especially heuristically. So, no, it's not that big of a leap.
Okay.
But I am not the coder. I am not a software engineer.
That's what I was getting at, I guess. Yeah.
That's my partner, Aaron Blondeau, who I met over in Slida. So that was the reason for moving to Slida, because I got to meet Aaron.
Well, let's go back to Trailquest and just explain it one more time for people who might not be familiar with exactly what that contest is.
So Trailquest is a challenge created by the Tourism Association to get people, motivate people to explore all the trails in the Gunnison area. And so that's trails all the way from the Monarch Crest all the way over into Curricani. So it's a big area. I think our last count, there are 783 miles of single track in that area. And so people record their miles, and then as they accumulate unique trail miles, they move up a leaderboard. And so far, we've had 6 finishers. You might know the person who finished first, Brittany,
I might know my wife.
and then you might know the person who finished second. It was Frank.
I might know
We
that guy
were,
too.
I, I tell you, it was so exciting watching y'all do the trails over the first 2 years. I was really stoked that Brittany, no slight against men, but I was really glad to see a woman bring it home first, I got to say.
Yeah.
And then I think Kimball Whitmere was the next to finish, and he did all of the miles in 1 year. Blew me away. Why would somebody go ride all of those trails in 1 year? I mean, maybe the first 500 miles of single track or 400 miles of single track is sweet. Everything after that is just kind of rugged. That is
But
rugged backcountry riding. Why would you want to go do all that?
but very, very fun in its own way, and yeah, as a Trailquest finisher, and it's I love comparing Kemble to me, especially. I've been here for 25 years, so I like riding different trails. So I'd explored a bunch of weird trails, and many of them were there for re-rides for me. But meanwhile, Kemble had moved here fairly recently, so I think he's stated it before that it was just such a great way for him to learn this new area that he had moved to, because it forced him.
And he had never really even ridden a mountain bike that much.
No, he had this old
kind of a novice mountain biker going
yeah,
out there.
yeah, exactly. He learned a lot that year. Talk about a way to learn. But yeah. So and you said before you think it's been more successful maybe than you or the Tourism Association maybe even expected?
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe they expected it to be as successful as it was, but I didn't, because I knew how hard those miles would be. Because I've been out there. I haven't gone all of them. I've had a string of unfortunate injuries these past few years, but I love to get out there and do the backcountry rides. I also like to have a lot of fun while I'm doing them. So I know how hard it can be. So it just amazes me that people like there's I don't know if people would want me to name them by name. There's people trying this year to do it quicker than Kimball.
Awesome.
Who email me on a pretty regular basis.
That's cool.
So that just amazes me that there's people out there like that. So our basic lesson from this experience was that there are people that were crazy enough to do a challenge this hard. Surely there are people out there that would be interested in more bite-sized challenges. Like it's a winning idea.
Yeah.
So anyways, it was a good opportunity to create something that was difficult to make.
So you mentioned that kind of helped you rebrand your company. So are there other locations that are doing something really similar to what the Gunnison Crested Butte Trailquest is?
There will be. We've got them locked and loaded and built for 6 other areas, but we've been keeping everything under wraps. When we launched our company in early March, and then the shelter-in-place order hit, and it changed everything.
Sure.
For us, like it did for a lot of people. So like our whole business plan, like the prospects we were going to contact, that plan sort of went out the window. And so, but I think it's going to end up being another one of those blessings, because it's pushed us into an area that I think has a lot more growth potential in the long term. It's actually a bigger need.
And what is that?
Virtual race support.
Okay.
There's zero people in that space, 0 businesses in that space. And so everything's just coming together possibly at the right time. We're supporting a few races already, a number of them, and I don't want to give them up just yet because they haven't had a chance to do their own marketing. And we're having tons of interesting discussions. And so I think we're in this new normal. And I think there's a lot of race organizations out there that are like, well, we can't get people together. How are we going to keep our race alive and keep people motivated doing stuff? And the businesses are thinking about, 18 months, 2 years from now. There's like this still being the norm. I think virtual racing is going to be a thing in the future.
So when you say virtual racing, and you mentioned the Growler earlier, so the Growlers usually takes place in May. It was canceled like most everything else. So what is a virtual bike race then?
It's interesting because the definition for a virtual race out there right now is a little too virtual maybe for our taste, but we'll go with it. So like right now in Strava, you can participate in virtual challenges, but you could, so a challenge might be to do a 5K or the Boston Marathon, but you do it at home, and you could do your 5K that's usually for some location. Well, you could do that at home, or you could accumulate a certain amount of vertical distance. Our virtual races we're going to accommodate that type of challenge, but I think we're more interested in a virtual race that actually occurs on a race course. So like the Growler. You can't do the Growler in Denver. If you want to do the Growler race, you got to come do the route. And so the virtual part of it is that people can compete against each other virtually at any time of their choosing. So they just go out, they do the course that's in the app with the turn-by-turn navigation, so they don't have to worry about course marshals or constantly stopping and opening up their phones or whatever, and save their files. And then when it syncs with the app, it figures out their finishing time. And also users can like crop their tracks. And so basically you can compete, you can do a race at any time of your choosing and get posted to a leaderboard.
Okay. And just to make sure I heard that right, so that your phone is talking to you during this too. So it's saying, left, turn
if you
left.
wanted to, if you turn on the turn-by-turn navigation, yeah, it'll do it.
Oh, that's really cool, especially in an area like Hartman's. There's a lot of trails, and you could get a little mixed up on following the right track. So that's a pretty cool thing.
You just download the map. It includes the audio file and the route, so it'll work offline. Turn your phone in airplane mode. Turn the volume up. Put it in your pocket and go.
Really cool. So why I want to go back to Trailquest and mapping for different areas. Like why is that important? Why do you think entities are contacting you to get?
It's part of the reason. It's part of the reason why I left, and I'm sad to say it because I really miss academia like terribly sometimes, because it was a great environment to be in. I really enjoyed it. It's very stimulating, awesome people. I sort of came to the conclusion that I was on a fool's errand, at least with what I was trying to do. And I got involved and became a basic scientist because I really wanted to improve human health some way, like make some basic just contribution, and didn't really care whether or not I get recognized for it. Just wanted to do something. And so I just, I also was working at that when I was my last postdoc, genetics one. I was also working with a mouse model of exercise. So mice selectively bred for high levels of wheel running. And these mice would run 14 miles a night on a running wheel. I'm not lying. They were super mice.
I was going to say, that's a long way for a mouse.
When you start really digging in to the biology of complex traits, it's like pulling a loose thread in a single knit sweater. There's nothing really to hang on to, because you just get deeper and deeper into questions. I just got to the point where I realized that there would never be a pill or a medical treatment better than for human health and well-being than outdoor exercise and outdoor movement, because that's what we evolved to do. How are you going to invent a treatment or a pill that's better than that if that's what, in part, you were made to do very well? So I was like, well, I'll just figure out how something to do with that. That's where Trailquest comes in. I think it's a really strong tool for motivating people to move outside with better maps, better turn-by-turn navigation to reduce barriers, and then gamifying it. I think there's a lot of potential there.
Absolutely. Well, and I think in our current times with coronavirus and everything too, it's a great way to get people to get off the beaten path and away from people too. That's another.
Well, social distancing is built into Trailquest, that's for sure.
Definitely. There are a lot of days and a lot of trails where you will not see anybody.
You're not going to get coronavirus and the needles.
Right.
So yeah, and there's just really no replacement for movement. And it's interesting because it's true. You do see in the media that people are starting to, and you don't know to what degree this is really true, but you just sort of sense it's true. It feels like common knowledge sort of in these kinds of times. people are, having to figure out new ways to, I don't know, reduce their stress. That opens up new opportunities, gives people more time to discover ways of, I don't know, enjoying life that they didn't before. And outdoor recreation is, like, no surprise, is like a huge thing. People are discovering it. And you see more and more articles in the paper about, like, how even going outside for a walk in the park reduces stress and makes people feel better. It's kind of like, no duh. So anyways, people I think are paying a lot more attention to the outdoors and outdoor exercise for sure during this time.
And I think that's something that most of us who live here or love to visit here or spend time here have probably been aware of, but for others, it might be something new. Well, I want to start wrapping things up, but I have a weird question to ask at the end. I mean, do you miss paper maps, and do you miss the way that I just look back at my first trips into the Needle Creek Reservoir area, the Needles as you call them, which are between Gunnison and Monarch Pass to the south. And it was just, you were just going to get lost there because there are cow trails everywhere, and there's just this and there's that. But it was kind of fun. That was part of the adventure. And then you get Trailquest and you just look at your phone and, oh, I was supposed to be over here. And then you just keep going, and it's a lot easier. I'm just curious if you miss that, or if you feel like there's.
Well, it's definitely a philosophical conundrum, right? Because the whole reason this ever even occurred to me in the first place is because we couldn't find any maps that had all the trails between Purgatory Resort and Durango back in the day, and so we followed some instructions that somebody had written back on a piece of a receipt paper, and to try to ride from Purgatory to Durango along the, connecting the resort to the Colorado Trail, and we got monumentally lost and benighted. And that night changed my life, and if I had that, my life wouldn't have been changed. So I don't know. It's a good question. I do miss maps to some degree, yes. When I was in the military, I was a land nav expert, and the maps were great just with topo lines and like rivers, because if like you're over in the Needles, you're like, well, I just need to stay down by the creek.
Right.
I need to climb up to this top of this ridge to get over to the other side. So I expect a trail will be there. So maps and that form of adventure. And I'll tell you, when I was going out and mapping these trails around Colorado for the first time, I mean, the whole reason I was doing it was because it was unknown to me. And so I get what you're saying for sure. Yes, there is something to be said for just raw exploration.
There's also something to be said for just showing up at a trailhead and cranking out a ride and getting back to the trailhead and enjoying a beer and not being stuck out at night. So,
and not looking at your phone at all.
Well, or looking at your phone, but your phone got you from A to B in a nice, easy manner.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm saying, yeah, it is nice to have an adventure, but sometimes it's nice to just, get stuff done. Anyway, well, let's start to wrap it up. Crested Butte is home for you, and you've had a lot of different homes. So you may have even been in Crested Butte longer than anywhere else you've been almost at this point. So why Crested Butte? Why is this your home?
Well, I mean, I tell people it's because I have a mountain biking problem. I love the trails around here because they're on mountains. But Crested Butte is home, I don't know, because I've lived a lot of places and I know what nice communities are like. And Crested Butte is a gem. There's not many places like Crested Butte in the world, not that I know of. And once I discovered it and started to get to know the people here, I wanted to live here. I love the people.
Absolutely. Common answer for all of us, for sure. Where can people learn more about your business, Trailquest and Trailquest and all those? What are some of the places to look for those things?
So Trailquest is a part of the CBG Trails app. So that's the Crested Butte Gunnison Trails app. So it's cbgtrails.com. And there's also an app for that by the same name. And then TerraQuest is just terraquest.com.
Perfect.
And that's the same name. The app goes by the same name.
Anything else I should have asked that you just want to talk about?
No.
Okay.
No, that's okay. But I've enjoyed talking with you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, no, it's been a good talk. And then final question is, who else should I interview?
Have you interviewed Dave Ox?
That was maybe like third or fourth. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
It was
go that
obviously
far
very
back.
entertaining,
Okay.
so that came to mind quickly.
Well, I see that you've interviewed other people that I know. I think one of the more interesting people in this area is a really quiet person flying underneath the radar. May not want to be interviewed. There's actually two of them. I'll throw out two: Matt Whiting and Doug Bradbury.
Yeah, both of those have kind of been on my list. Doug was all about it, and then we just have had trouble getting together. So that would be obviously really
That's
interesting
all.
stuff.
That sounds like Doug.
Okay, so it's not just me. That's good to know. Good to know.
No, that's Doug.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thanks for taking some time tonight, and I will hopefully see you out on some random trails this summer.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you for listening to the Crested Butte Home podcast. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast player, or you can also visit crestedbutteshome.com for all of the episodes as well as real estate information. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Crested Butte is Home. Thanks so much for spending a little bit of time with me as always. And if you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends. I always appreciate that a lot. If you have any real estate questions, give me a call anytime, and I will see you in a couple of weeks with another new episode.